Now let's engage in a very exciting subject called the art of persuasion. Let me give you some notes to take, because I found there's a great deal of difference between presentation and persuasion. When I first got into sales, I became a pretty good presenter. Show taught me well. I used to hear people say, I've listened to a lot of salesmen, but you've got to be one of the best. I thought, wow, the man has taught me well. Somebody else would say, hey, I've been around, I think I've heard them all, but wow, you've got to be the best. You're one of the greatest salesmen I've ever heard. And I thought, wow, I've learned this stuff pretty quickly. Then one day the awful truth dawned on me. I thought, hey, wait a minute. Something's wrong here. If I'm one of the world's all-time great salesmen, how come they ain't buying? It started to dawn on me that I had an additional skill to learn. I got very good at presentation. I had yet to get good at persuasion. There were two great orators of antiquity. One was Demosthenes. He was a Greek. The other was Cicero. Cicero was a Roman. And they were both great speakers. But it was said of Cicero, when he spoke, everybody said, what a great speech. It was said of Demosthenes, when he spoke, everybody said, let us march. And that's the difference between presentation and persuasion. I'm asking you to learn this additional skill. We call you a good persuader if now the results start to follow. If something starts to happen, if people decide, if they actually do something about your presentation, if they do something about your appeal, if something happens, now we know you have truly become what we call a persuader. So let's talk about the art of persuasion and what all it entails. Let me give it to you. Here's number one. Be a good storyteller. If you're involved in a company that deals in numbers and business and products and volume of business, make sure you translate all the business into stories. Sometimes it's easy to say, we did $10 million in business last month. And then we forget the stories that are involved in that 10 million. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Become story conscious as well as figure conscious. How many stories does $10 million represent? And if you're only interested in the numbers and not the stories, you'll be limited in your future skills of communication. Try to translate activity and business and volume and money and numbers into people's lives and stories and who all is involved in the transactions. Okay? Now here's another key. Become your own best storyteller. Learn to tell your own story. Whether it's identification, logic, solutions. Be a student of your own life. It's so important to go back over your own life. It's good to review at the end of the day your experiences of the day. We call it learning to reflect. One of the keys of making the past more valuable to invest it in the future is learning how to reflect. And let me give you some good times to reflect. One is at the end of the day. Take a few minutes at the end of the day and go back over your day. Who did you see and who did you meet and who did you talk to and what happened? Why did they say what they said and why did you say what you said? We call it running the tapes again. And if you'll take a few minutes at the end of a day and run the tapes of the day again, that day will take a more important place in your equity future. You'll be able to draw from that day. But if you casually go through the day, and then if you casually miss the opportunity to lock that day into your consciousness, sure enough, at some future time when you could have drawn from that experience, it won't be available. Here's how to lock in your past and make it more of an equity. Number two, take a few hours at the end of the week to go back over a week. A week is a pretty good chunk of time. The sights and the sounds and the colors and the people and the decisions and the mistakes and the errors and the successes. Just go back and review that week and let that week take a more powerful place in your awareness. A half a day at the end of the month. A month is really a good chunk of time. We wouldn't let a company go by without taking a look at least in 30 days. You can't be casual about taking a look. Somebody says, well, let's let the company go a few years and then we'll take a look. Say, no, you can't wait a few years. That would be too late. You could be so far off track. Now, I'm asking you not to let your life go more than about 30 days without taking a serious look at the numbers and what you've done and what you've said and how you've grown and your experiences, so that one more 30-day period takes a stronger place in your life. Take a weekend at the end of the year called Time to Reflect. Why? To make the past more valuable. If you treat it so, experiences can become commodity. currency, coin. Now, why try to make the past more valuable? Here's the simple answer: to invest it in the future. Let me offer you this challenge: to gather up more of your past and invest it in your future. And part of it is studying your own story, because your own story could be so powerful in identifying and offering answers and solutions. No telling what, if you took a little time, you could uncover that you just haven't talked about for a long time. If you were to dig back, no telling what additional stories and experiences you could reawaken, so that when the opportunity came, you could draw from that experience and invest it into that conversation, and no telling who you could touch. And without it, it might be a touch you couldn't make and a reach for which you're too short. Stories, your story, other people's stories. What a great way to illustrate fact and ideas and philosophy is to use the stories of life, because that's the real stuff of life, the stories of life. All right, here's number 2 in the art of persuasion. Accurate facts. Accurate facts. We call it dealing in truth. Accuracy is very important. Here's why. It builds credibility. Credibility starts to weaken if you mess with the facts, the truth, the correct numbers. Now, everybody will give you room for what we call an unintentional error in dealing in facts. Now, see, if my watch says about 7:28, but if you were to ask me what time is it, and I was to say it's 7:30, you would allow me to be a couple of minutes off, right? If I said it was 7:30, but accurately, really, truthfully, it was 7:28, you would give me that error to just quickly say 7:30, right? You would say, you didn't mean to mess up my life, right? By leading me astray with this erroneous information that it was 7:30 when really it was only 7:28. Now, there are times and occasions when you may have to be precise, and it may be a life and death matter, who knows. But in generally speaking, people will give you room for making what we call an unintentional error in stating what we call the truth. But beyond a sort of reasonableness of unintentional error to what we call in higher circles unacceptable. Some people deal in exaggeration, and it starts to destroy their credibility. If you're giving testimony in a trial, and you're on the witness stand, if they catch you in one lie, guess what they do with the rest of your testimony? They throw it all away. Why? You have destroyed your credibility. The guy says, well, no, I only lied just that one time. Well, how are we going to believe that? All it takes is one to now weaken your whole testimony, right? So here's part of the key in the art of persuasion. Dealing in truth. Dealing in fact. Here's what we call true sophistication. A total absence of exaggeration. Why? It's unnecessary to the sophisticated. Here's what we call exaggeration. The childish attempt to make up for lack of self-worth. If you don't feel adequate, more often than not you tend to deal in exaggerations, to make up in numbers what you may lack in character, or what you lack in substance, or what you lack in confidence. But if you start building character and confidence, and precision of thinking and decision-making, and you have a sense of growing worth and value, you don't mind dealing in absolute truth and accuracy, because that's what counts. Here's the next key. Better understated than overstated. I have a book called Seasons of Life, and it's got my picture in it. And it isn't the best picture. You know, the book came out about 3 years ago. I published it myself. Every once in a while somebody says, Mr. Rohn, this picture of you in this book, Seasons of Life, is not the greatest picture of you. I said, I know, that's why it's in there. So that when I show up, I'll look better than the picture. Right, a lot of people use these glamour Hollywood shots, right? And when they show up in person, they look a little used around the edges, right? I'd rather have people surprised on the upside than surprised on the disappointing side. If you're working with people, let me give you one of the greatest clues I've learned. When you're working with people, let them find out it was more than you promised, and let them find out it was easier than you said. Later, you always want people to be surprised that it's more than you promised, and it's easier than you said. Key here, learn to trust the truth. If the truth isn't enough, then all you have to do is become stronger yourself in presenting the truth. All right, number one was stories. Number two, accuracy, facts, telling the truth. Sometimes you never know who's going to be around to check the accuracy of your stories. But learn to trust the truth. There's nothing more powerful than the truth. I got an ancient quote for you. Here's what it is. The truth will set you free. That's what sets you free, the truth. Many people are dealing in affirmations, but I'll tell you what sets you free, the truth. The best thing to affirm is the truth. If you're broke, best thing to affirm is, I am broke. That's what you put up on the refrigerator. It's the truth that sets you free. Right? When you're shaving in the morning, gentlemen, if you're broke, you just put that up there. I'm broke. There's nothing better to set you free than the awesome facts, the truth. So deal in truth. Affirmation without discipline leads to delusion. And the discipline and the accuracy of knowing your situation. You say, well, that's a bit negative. You've got to deal somewhat in negativity. If you've got something fairly wrong with your heart, looks like you're going to need a major operation, how many x-rays do you want them to take to find out what's really wrong? Somebody says, oh, just take one and see if we catch it. You say, no, not my heart. How many x-rays do you want them to take? It's kind of a negative subject, taking x-rays. How many? As many as it takes to find the full extent of the facts called the negative problem. So best to state the truth. Now we can deal with truth. Now we can deal with the problem if we accurately state it and we take an x-ray that shows it in all of its insidiousness. Now we can go after it and we can effect a cure. Now we can start the positive treatment. But at first, you got to know the problem before you can find the answer. So dealing in truth, so important. It sets you free. Next in the list of key things to remember in the art of persuasion, I've got down here quotes. You might as well borrow somebody else's good language. If they've said it extremely well and you can use it to illustrate a point, just borrow it. I borrow everything I can borrow. All the stuff Mr. Schoaf taught me, I borrow all that. You know, try my best to give him credit for all the things he shared with me. But borrow. Some people have said it so well, there's no use trying to think up another way to say it. Quotes. It shows you've done your homework. It shows you're passionately interested in your subject. The quotes, the stories. In some other seminars I give, I use a lot of quotes. I'm talking about humans being affected by each other, and I quote the lyrics from a recent song that says, if not for you, the winter would hold no spring, couldn't hear a robin sing, I just wouldn't have a clue if not for you. Now see, that's so well said, you couldn't improve much on that. So the key is to just borrow all that you can borrow to support your argument, to express your heart, or to express your mind and your feelings. This is part of the art of persuasion, learning to borrow things well said and well constructed. Winston Churchill said, the truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it, and ignorance may deride it, but in the end, there it is. See, that's so well said, and it's so precise. And it's so dramatic that you might as well borrow the drama that comes from the language just by exercising the quote. I talk about the brevity of life in one of my other lectures. The Beatles wrote, life is so short. And for John on the streets of New York, it was extra short. But see, those are powerful words. Elton John sings, she lived her life like a candle in the wind. Wow, you can't think of much better lyrics to describe how fragile life is and how brief it is. Right? Those are unique words, and the key is to learn the words and borrow the quotes to support your expressions, your communication, your conversations. Benjamin Disraeli said, nothing can resist a human will that will stake its existence on its purpose. Wow, that's powerful. We call this towering language. We call this climbing the summit of words and sentences and phrases that have incredible meaning, so briefly said and yet so powerfully done. And you might as well borrow the power and borrow the explanation and borrow the effect of somebody else's unique words. Just borrow those and put them into your presentation. You'll see the dramatic difference right away. And think up words of your own that are powerful, but when you need it, reach and borrow somebody who has said it well, and offer it for somebody to consider, to touch the heart and touch the soul and mend the problem and get somebody to decide, to try, to move, to change, to grow. Of course, this isn't an easy task. It wasn't meant to be easy. It was meant to be a price, because that's how you appreciate the promise of language, the language that affects the cure, the language that reaches and touches. You've got to go through some of these skills, learn the craft. Now, I've got another word down here you might not have that much use for. It's called oratory. Oratory is a dramatic way of saying something, to catch someone's attention, to drive the point home. But I do have a bit of oratory. One of my lectures, I'm dealing with the problem of complaining. I go through a whole list called the diseases of attitude. And when I get to the last one, complaining, I'm wanting to really make it clear. And I say, spend 5 minutes complaining and you have wasted 5. And you may have begun what's known as economic cancer of the bone. They will soon haul you off into a financial desert and there let you choke on the dust of your own regret. That's what we call a bit of oratory, right? Oratory. Just a burst, right? Now, you can't do 30 minutes of that, right? That'd be too much. But when the occasion calls for it, oratory, saying something in a more dramatic fashion. Here's the next one. This is very important in dealing in the art of persuasion. Straight talk. Doesn't almost everybody make the comment? Tell it like it is. And that was one of the great experiences I had in meeting this incredible gentleman, Mr. Schoaf, when I was 25 years old. Mr. Schoaf only went to the 8th grade in school, so we put things in very simple language. He said, Mr. Rohn, if you're 25 years old and you're an American male and you've been to high school and 1 year of college and you're not at least a third of your way towards your fortune, he said, isn't something wrong? Now, see, I'd never looked at it like that before. As being wrong, he said, something's wrong, right? And he said, there's nothing wrong with the country and nothing wrong with the companies and there's nothing wrong with the banks and the money, but there's something wrong with your plan. There's nothing wrong with you, but there's something wrong with your thinking, something wrong with your plan. You bought the wrong story. You bought the wrong formula. And it's easy to wind up a nice person and broke. It's easy to wind up sincere and poor. I'm telling you, you can be sincere and poor, and you can work hard and be poor if you buy the wrong formula, buy the wrong plan. You didn't add up the percentages. You never took out the calculator. You never counted the cost, as an ancient phrase says. Now, see, that kind of blunt, straight language really helped to uncover where my problem lay. Let me give you one of the most clear formulas he gave me that helped to change my life. We deal in what we call basics in one of my lectures. Basics, fundamentals. And there's just a few fundamentals. And there aren't any new fundamentals. You've got to beware of somebody who says, I got a new fundamentals. And no, fundamentals are old. Here's one of the greatest of basics and fundamentals. It comes from an ancient Bible phrase. Here's what it says. Whatever you sow, you will reap. We call it simply the law of sowing and reaping. Right? Simply put, the law of sowing and reaping. Now then, Mr. Schoaf said to me, Mr. Rohn, there's another way to quote this law that may very well help to discover where the problem lies. I said, okay, I'm ready. Here's what he said. It's also quoted like this. Whatever you reap is what you've sown. I thought, wow, I never thought about that. Now there went my list of all the things I blamed for my current circumstances. If you don't like the crop, who do you look up? Answer, whoever planted it. And where do you find who planted your crop? Answer, in the mirror. That's where you go come fall, come harvest time. You go to the mirror. And if necessary, you say, a few skinny carrots? I got to be unimpressed. Where were you last spring? Asleep. Didn't you read the books? Did you break your hoe? This is talking straight. This is telling it like it is. I asked the question last night, am I reading enough books or am I not? If I engage in my current financial practices, will it take me toward the fortune I would wish for in the next 10 years or will it not? If I keep up my current health practices, will I have the vitality and the health and the vigor to do all the things I want to do 5 years from now? Will I or won't I? Are my current practices taking me where I would really like to go, or have I been kidding myself for quite some time? I had a day just before I met Mr. Schoaf called Do Not Kid Myself Anymore Day. Here's where I am after 25 years. Here's what I've got. There's no use Mickey Mousing with the numbers. There's no use trying to stretch it. There's no use trying to excuse it. There's no use trying to paint it some phony color. Let's tell it like it is. Because it's the truth that starts the freedom mechanism working. It's the truth that starts to relieve the mind of all the guilt and all the excuses and get right down to where it is. When I finally discovered that the government wasn't my problem, and that prices weren't my problem, and that it wasn't the company, and it wasn't company policy, and it wasn't my negative relatives, and it wasn't the weather, and it wasn't the economy, and it wasn't the community, when I finally discovered it was me, we call that trauma. Now, after I had passed through the trauma of discovering that it was me and not all the other things I'd blamed all those years, when I finally went through the trauma, now suddenly it dawned on me, hey, if it's me, I can do something about that right away. And then I started getting excited after my trauma had passed. The only change that is really going to dramatically affect your life is you. Mr. Shoaff said to me, Mr. Rohn, if it isn't going well for you, you don't say, what's wrong out there? You say, what's wrong in here? There's a Black Heritage spiritual that says, it's not my mother nor my father. It's not my brother nor my sister. It's me. What a revelation. But once you find out it's you, that's something you can go to work on this very day. You can start to make a new stretch today. You can start reading some new books today. You can sign up for some new classes today. You can start engaging in constructive thinking today. You can make some life-changing decisions today. See, you don't ever have to be the same again after this evening, only by choice. Now, this is called dealing in straight talk. Next, in the art of persuasion, challenge. Challenge. We all respond to a challenge. I don't know a normal human being that doesn't respond to a challenge. From the time we were small, how high can you jump? How fast can you run? How much can you do? Can you win? Right? We all respond to a challenge. So part of the art of persuasion is challenge. Here's one of the greatest challenges Mr. Shoaff gave me. He said, let's go do it. That's the great challenge. Not you go do it, let's go do it. Boy, it's easy to say you go do it. You go change your life, you go be successful, you go make the decisions. But how much better if somebody comes along and says, let's go do it. Let's read the extra books, let's make the decisions, let's pour it on. For the next 6 months, let's go full speed 110% and see what comes of that. Boy, what an inspiring thing when somebody says, let's go do it. That's the greatest of challenge. Let's. But life is a challenge. What else is new? It is so important to articulate the challenge, the press, the push, because the push is on. But that's what life is all about, accepting the challenge, driving the roots deep, becoming as strong as possible, accepting everything that comes and making it into what you wish to make it, attempting your best, trying your hardest, thinking well, reading well, living well, struggling with it all. That's called the challenge. But that's what makes life worthwhile. That's where the value is. The struggle for high ideals to make something unique out of your life. I don't know how better to put it. That's it, the challenge. Now, here's the last part in the art of persuasion. The word is passion. Passion is the emotion. Unique thing about emotions. Emotions is what gives us the drive. Emotions is the spirit. Emotions is the life. It isn't just knowledge that makes you wealthy. It's knowledge mixed with feelings and attitudes and emotions. The surge of feelings and emotions. But here's the key. Our emotions need to be educated. We've got to send emotions to school. We call civilization the intelligent management of human emotions. You've got to have the drive. Without the power, you don't get anywhere. But now we've got to have the power well educated and well directed. But that's what it takes in the final art of persuasion, putting yourself into the picture. Passion, emotion, beliefs, convictions. If you can learn to articulate those well, if you'll learn to let that flow, not just from the surface, but from down deep, from a lifetime of experience, if you'll draw from all of those feelings and commitments and awareness, even with some misgivings, even with not knowing it all, even with a sense of humility, But it's that flow of emotion that finally now seals the point in the final art of persuasion, when people have picked up the essence that you really believe and are committed to what you've been talking about, and that's why you laid it on the line. That's why you borrowed every quote you could borrow. That's why you said it as well as you could say it. That's why you told every story you could. That's why you used yourself front and center. It's because you so passionately believe in the moment and what you're trying to accomplish in the way of decision-making in touching somebody else's life. Now, how good can you get at all of this, the art of persuasion? Probably one of the best illustrations I can give you is an ancient Bible story. I'm an amateur on the Bible, but there's some neat stories. One is so dramatically told, it bears repeating. It says, King Agrippa was advised one day that he had a famous man in his prison. And they came and said, "Oh, Agrippa, we have got the man you've been wanting for a long time. We've got him locked up in your dungeon." And King Agrippa knew who the man was. He was the great leader of the early Christians, formerly known as Saul from Tarsus, now known as Paul, apostle, leader of the early Christians. And Agrippa has been brought this incredible news that this man is in his dungeon. I'm sure Agrippa said, "You don't mean the man himself." They said, "O king, we have got the man." Agrippa evidently had studied this whole Christian movement and had watched it grow. And evidently he knew a lot about the man. And he said, "Bring him to me. I got to see the man in person." So they hauled him out of the dungeon and stood this man in front of the king. And the king took one look at Paul and said, "Paul, I've heard all about you. Unfortunately, you find yourself in my dungeon. But what is going on here? What is this Christian movement? Why are all these people willing to give their lives for this incredible cause and willing to sacrifice? It's growing like a prairie fire, spreading like wildfire." He said, "What's going on here? What is happening? What is this Christian thing? What about you?" And Agrippa said, "Tell me your story." He shouldn't have asked. Right? One more time, with eloquence to spare. And if you're a good reader of drama and stories, this is one of the most important ones to read in all of literature and history. He gave the greatest example of somebody who knew how to use the language to tell his story. And he went through and told his story. He said, "I used to hate the Christians. I was known as Saul from Tarsus. And then one day I'm making it for Damascus. This great light shines out of heaven, knocks me flat, grinds my face in the dirt, and blinds me for 3 days." He told the story with eloquence and precision and drama. And then he said, "I was finally persuaded to be a Christian, became a leader, and now the people I hated I now love." He went through the whole scenario. And he wrapped up his presentation to King Agrippa by saying, "O king, I only now have one request." And Agrippa said, "Pray tell, what is that?" And the great man said, "My request is, I wished you were just like me. I wish you had what I got, except for these chains. I don't wish these chains on you, but for the change, not the chains. If you could see what I can see, if you could have what I've got, that would be my greatest wish." What an occasion. What a chance for eloquence. What a chance for precision of language. What a chance to relate your experiences and pull from the past and relate it to the future and bring it to the drama of the present. And when he finished his story, the story says the king did send him back to the dungeon, but before he sent him back, he did look squarely at the man and say, "I must admit, sir, you have almost persuaded me to be a Christian." What a drama. What an occasion. So how good can you get at this art of persuasion and communication? Well, you might get so good, you might have a chance to persuade the king. Let alone anybody else between you and the king, they won't have a chance. I've had this debate with Zig now for 45 years. Should you start with education or motivation? The attitude's the motivation. Philosophy is the education. Zig says motivation first, then education. I say education first, then motivation. It's a good debate. I say, Zig, if a guy's an idiot, you motivate him. Now you got a motivated idiot. So score one for me. But now Zig comes back. Here's what Zig says. Yes, but you have to be motivated to be educated. Well, that's very good. That's very good. So our debate continues. Get around successful people and listen. Now, you can also learn from unsuccessful people. Take notes on both. Negative and positive. On the negative, the notes are called what not to do. And you got to learn what not to do as well as what to do. So learn from the negative as well as the positive. Okay? Find out what poor people read and don't read it. Right? That's good information. Learn from the negative. But now you can also learn from the positive. Get around successful people. Listen to what they say. Listen to how they say it. It's important. We've all got about 16 waking hours. Practice listening those 16 hours. And I say practice listening because listening isn't easy. I found out it's easier to talk than it is to listen. But if you will practice listening the 16 hours you're awake, sure enough, from surprising sources comes great ideas. In sales training we teach, if you want to learn sales, listen to the kids. Kids have got to be the master salespeople of all time. They have no equal. Father tells his young son, no, you cannot have an ice cream cone. 30 minutes later, he's licking on one. That'd be 30 minutes worth listening to. They got moves you wouldn't believe. Persistence runs deep like the ocean. And the kids never took a class on how to overcome objections. They already know how. They don't need classes. You tell kids no. That goes right on by. They give you 3 good reasons. You say no. It goes right on by. They give you 3 more. They're masters. So listen and learn. Now, here's some of the best advice I've got for the whole evening. It won't get any better than this. This is it. Poor people ought to take rich people out to dinner and listen. That's some of the best I got. If a guy's not doing well, one of the first things he ought to do is find a guy that is doing well and offer to buy him his dinner. Spend $50, $60, $80, $100. Go for the full 9 course. Start him on the juices and hors d'oeuvres. Get him started talking. The salad takes 15 minutes. Keep it rolling. Biggest steak in town takes 45. Keep it rolling. Pour on the dessert. Stretch that meal out about 2 hours. If you get a successful person to eat and talk for 2 hours, they're liable to drop ideas in your lap, change your life. Multiply your income by 2, by 3, by 5. But you're right. Poor people don't usually take rich people out to dinner. That's the problem. The guy said he's rich, let him buy his own dinner. I'm not coming up with any money. And he says, besides, you work where I work. By the time you struggle home, it's late. You're lucky to get your own supper, let alone running around trying to find a rich man to feed. And the guy's behind on his house payment. Good worker, hard worker, sincere. But you got to be better than sincere. Work hard. You wind up broke. You got to be better than a good worker. You got to be a good listener. And remember, what you read and what you hear, put the good stuff in your journal. Now, here's the third way to find out how to change your life. And that's to observe. You can pick up a lot of ideas just by watching. Get around successful people and watch. Here's why. Success leaves clues. Watch how the man shakes hands. Watch how the lady responds. People who do well do certain things over and over and over and over. And if you're clever, you can pick them up. Watch it all. If a guy's making $10,000 a month, I'd watch how he walks. Maybe that's it. Copy his funny little walk. Somebody says, well, that's kind of a silly walk. Say, it's 10,000. I haven't got the money yet, but I got the walk. It's bound to start somewhere. What I ask you tonight is to be unusual and be a good observer of what's going on. You can pick up ideas that can change your life starting tomorrow. Just be a more careful observer. Now remember, there's two ways to see. One is called sight. See with your eyes. The other one is called insight. See with your mind. See with your eyes, you'll see things. See with your mind, you'll see answers. Put your eyes and your mind to work. And the best advice on developing sight and insight is pay attention. Don't miss anything. In the weekend seminar we teach, one of the greatest fatalities to success is preoccupation, lack of concentration. The guy's mind wanders. See, you wind up average. You've got to learn to zero in and concentrate. I read a good article one time, Reader's Digest. The title was, "Wherever You Are, Be There." Excellent. Don't miss anything. Find out how things work, but it's so very important finding out. And I've given you 3 ways to find out. Okay, number 1 was find out how things work. Here's number 2. Go to work. You must now take action on what you found out. In doing business around the world, we call it game plan. Put together your game plan. One of the major things we teach on the weekend seminars, game plans. How to game plan your office. If you're in sales, you need a game plan. Kids need a game plan. You need a home game plan, social game plan, a business game plan. Everybody needs game plans. Financial independence, game plan. Your investment, game plan. Don't think in your head. Put it on paper. Don't operate out of your mind. Operate from paper. I often ask somebody, what are you going to do the next 6 months? And somebody starts to tell me. I say, no, don't tell me. Show me. Show me your game plan for the next 6 months. Then I can look at things and maybe I can help. But you got to operate from paper. Put it on a game plan. Take action on what you found out. Now here's the best word I know of to go with action. Massive. See, that'll change everything. Massive action is called the cure-all. If you're going to make calls, make a few thousand. If you're going to make contacts, make a few thousand. If you're going to knock on doors, knock on a few thousand. See, that'll change everything. Here's the language of the poor. I'll try it a time or two and see what happens. It's the way poor people talk. The guy says, well, I'll give it 30 days. 30 days. You could guess his bank balance. You've got to have a better game plan. So here's one of the major things to do starting tomorrow. Take a look at your game plan. If it isn't loaded with massive action, change it tomorrow. Action. The formula really works like this. Pick up a good idea, take heavy action. Pick up a couple of good ideas, take heavy action. Take heavy action on a good idea. Right? That's the ratio. Now here's the key. Don't wait till you've learned 2,000 or 3,000 things. Because that way you'll use up all the time. And you could wind up smart and broke. And hey, it's okay to be dumb and broke. But if a guy's smart and broke, that's pitiful. Don't let your learning lead to knowledge. You'll become a fool. Let your learning lead to action. You can become wealthy. And there's many kinds of wealth, I understand that, not just money. Money's one of the least of all values. I know some people with a lot of money that are very poor. Evita sings, as for fortune and as for fame, they are illusions. They're not the solutions they promised to be. So there's all kinds of wealth, but to get a big share coming your way, you've got to have a heavy action game plan. Don't try to beat the system. Find out how it works, work it, but don't try to beat it. Some people learn just enough to start slicing it, shading it, thinning it, cutting corners, and looking for cheap answers. See, don't fall for that. You'll wind up with a cheap life. Find out how it works best and do it that way. Even though it seems to take a little longer, do it right. Don't compromise with right. Now, under this step, here's another key. Be a quick learner. Don't let it take long to teach you. Learn quick. Don't run at the wall too many times. Learn quicker. One guy said he broke his nose 7 times in the same place. Somebody says, looks like you'd stay out of that place. Learn quicker. Now, the third point here is don't be stubborn. See, some people won't change even when a better way comes. They say, well, I've been doing it this way 30 years. Hey, be ready for change. If it's a better way, go for it. But don't try to beat it. Or you'll be like the guy that went to Las Vegas. He didn't have much money, so he didn't want to risk his money gambling. But he gets to Las Vegas and the jackpot bells are ringing, the money's flowing, the lights are flashing, and he can't help himself. He's got to gamble. But instead of gambling with his cash, he decides to play the mental gambling game. And the brilliant scheme he worked out goes like this. He'd pick a number like number 3. Mentally, he would bet a certain amount of money on the number. And whether it won or lost, he would jot down that amount in his little pad. I would have won $5 if I'd have made that bet, just to keep track of it, win or lose. That way, come midnight, he can calculate how he's doing, winner, loser, how much, only not his money. Keep his money. Just play this mental gambling game. So here he is around the gambling table, everybody else shelling out their hard-earned cash. He's got this brilliant scheme. Instead of betting with his money, he's betting with his mind, and he lost his mind. Which means don't try to beat the system, I guess. Now that we find ourselves on the spinning planet, you just have to learn what I call the setup. Learn the setup. Life's setup. Now, we didn't set it up, but we're here, so you got to learn it. And we should learn the setup for 2 basic reasons. Number 1, to keep from getting hurt. It's one of the major reasons for learning, so you won't get hurt. See, economically, socially, personally, you can get hurt just not knowing. Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is poverty. Ignorance is tragedy. You got to know, or you're going to get hurt. It's good to know not to walk out the 10-story window. That's excellent information. Now, what if a guy didn't know and he walks out? Now he's dead at the bottom. Somebody says, well, the poor guy didn't know. You got to know, or you're going to get hurt. Now, here's a parenthesis. You don't have to like the setup. I don't ask you to like how it is. That's not what's important. But it is important to learn how it is. Okay, so you don't have to like it, but you should learn it. That's what I tell the kids, right? Make sure you get the information. What you think about it, that's up to you. What you're going to do with it, that'll soon be up to you. But make sure you get it. See, there's nothing worse than being stupid. Nothing. I mean, being broke is bad. But being stupid is awful. And what's really bad is being broke and stupid, right? That's about the end of the world. I mean, there isn't anything much worse than that. Unless you're sick. Sick, broken, stupid. I mean, that is it, right? There's nowhere else to go. So make sure you get the information. It's key. You don't have to like it, but learn it. If this big monstrous thing lifts up in the sky, hangs there for a little while, cuts loose, comes crashing down, boom, shakes the ground for 5 miles. And then this big monstrous thing lifts back up in the sky, hangs there for a little while, cuts loose again, comes crashing down, boom, shakes the ground for 5 miles. It just keeps doing it, this big monstrous thing, lifting up and then crashing down, boom. Now, you might come along one day and say, that's got to be a stupid arrangement, which is okay. You're entitled to your opinion. But the first thing you should learn to do is get out from under it. That's number 1. You might have a great moral argument. You might want to shake your finger at the sky, but do it from over there, right? So you don't get smashed. It's called your basic smart. So number one, learn so you won't get hurt, whether you like it or not. Learn. Now here's the second reason for learning, the setup, to benefit. It's called the plus of life. And that's what life is, right? Both minus and plus. The minus is tragedy, heartache, misery, failure, unhappiness. But life is also happiness, prosperity, good feelings. So here's the key. Learn to get on the good side of the way things work. Now here's two of the basic laws, and we'll take our break. Shof taught me these. They come from the Bible. Now again, I'm an amateur, okay? When it comes to the Bible, I'm not a pro. So you'll sort of have to take my way of putting it. But here they are. The first one is the law of use. The law of use. And it goes something like this. Whatever you don't use, you lose. Lack of use causes loss. On this planet. Maybe not the next one, but on this one. If you tie your arm to your body, leave it there long enough, you'll never use it again. It's over. For the arm. Now, it may not be over, but it's over for the arm. The only way to keep the use of this arm is what? Keep using it. If you quit, you lose. Automatically. They don't bring it up for a vote. You lose automatically when you quit. Now, the same thing that goes for your arm goes for your brain, mentality. The same thing goes for all the human virtues. Ambition, unused, declines. Strong feelings, unused, diminish. It doesn't grow, it diminishes. Faith, unused, decreases. It's a law. Vitality, unused, diminishes. Energy, unused, decreases. The guy says, well, I'm going to save up my energy. You can't do that. That's like trying to save today, put it on the end of the year. See, you can't do that. They'll come take you away. If you don't use today, what? It's lost. The guy says, well, I'll work twice as hard tomorrow to make up for it. See, that's foolish. You could have done that anyway. Today unused is lost. A talent unused is lost. An ability unused is lost. So here's one of the key expressions of the evening. Take a new inventory of yourself. Starting tomorrow, new project. Take a new inventory. And make sure that all of your talent and ability and mentality and ingenuity and vitality and strong feelings, faith, courage, make sure that all you've got's being used. Otherwise, you lose. Now, one of the best illustrations of the law of use is a Bible story called the Parable of the Talents. The talent story. Interesting story if you haven't read it in a while. Just review it. It's a good story. An ancient story. It says there was a master with 3 servants. He got them together one day and he said to the 3, I've got these talents. And in those ancient days, a talent was a measure of gold. And he said to the 3 servants, take these talents and see what you can do with them while I'm gone. He said, I'm taking a journey and I'll be gone for a while. When I come back, we'll get together, go over the book, see how you did. He said, here's 5 of these talents for you. 5. Here's 2 of them for you. 2. And here's 1 for you. 1. The master said, take those talents, see what you can do with them. When I come back, we'll get together, we'll go over it all. The servant said, okay, master takes off. According to the ancient story, the master comes back from his trip. When he gets back, he gets the 3 servants together, and as he said he would, he asks, how did it go with those talents? You were 5. What happened? That servant said, well, I took the 5 talents you gave me, and I put them to work. A little shaky at first, but he said things finally got rolling. And he said, I poured it on. And he said, my talents grew to 7, 8, 9, 10. He said, I doubled my talents from 5 to 10. Books will show. Master said, one heck of a job. Or something like that. He said, I gave you 2 talents. What happened? That servant said about the same thing happened to me. I put those 2 talents to work, poured it on. They grew to 3 and then to 4. He said, I doubled my talents from 2 to 4. Books will show. Master said, well done. He said, I gave you 1 talent. What happened? That servant said, well, I took the talent you gave me, and I carefully wrapped it, and I dug a hole and buried it. And camouflaged it, I suppose, right? So nobody would steal it. And he said, fortunately, nobody got it. And he said, I knew you were going to be here today, so I dug it up. Here it is, safely wrapped. I did not lose it while you were gone. According to the ancient story, the master said, take that talent away from him and give it to the man that's got 10. Now you might say, well, I don't like that arrangement. The poor guy's only got 1 talent. He's already got 10. It ought to be more even. Remember, I didn't ask you to like it. But this one I would ask you to learn, because it simply means whatever you do not employ, you forfeit. It's a law. So learn well the law of use. Now here's the second one, and we're going to take our break. Second law from the Bible. This one we've heard since we were small, I'm sure. It's called the law of sowing and reaping. In fact, we've probably heard it so often we could quote it. It says, whatever you sow, what? You shall reap. Fairly blunt, hopefully clear. Here's my first suggestion on the law of sowing and reaping. Don't try to beat it. You might as well try sitting on the sun in the morning. Keep it from coming up. You'll have better luck. Whatever you sow, you reap. Now, for a fair share of my life, I'm a bit mixed up on how all this applies. Among a lot of things I was mixed up on. I knew I wasn't reaping too good. That I understood. My problem was I was confused about what was causing it. Remember me with the funny list? I thought those are the reasons why it isn't working out well. And then Mr. Schoaf gave me the clue that helped me figure it all out. He said, Mr. Rohn, I have another answer for you. There's another way to quote this law that'll show you where the problem is so you can go to work on it right away. All you need to know is where the problem is. Then you can go to work on it. So he quoted me the law another way, and I found out what my problem was. Here's the way you quote the law. Whatever you reap is what you've sown. Now I knew what my problem was. Whatever you reap is what you've sown. If you don't like the crop, who do you look up? Answer, whoever planted it. And where do you find who planted your crop? Answer, in the mirror. What I finally learned to do come fall was to go to the mirror. That's where you go. And if necessary, you say, a few skinny carrots? I got to be unimpressed. Where were you last spring? Asleep. Didn't you read the books? Did you break your hoe? Let me give you 7 key points to the law of sowing and reaping. Let's tick right down through the list of 7, and it'll be break time. 7 points to sowing and reaping. Here's part of the philosophy that really helped me to make some changes in life direction. Number 1, the law of sowing and reaping is negative. That's number 1, which simply means if you sow bad, you reap bad. Now, this is kind of 3rd grade, but it doesn't hurt to go over the basics. If you plant thistle seeds, you don't get pumpkins. Honest, no use looking for pumpkins. John says, how come no pumpkins? Come on, John. The law's negative. That's how come. Now, here's number 2. The law's positive. Which simply means if you sow good, you reap good. If you plant pumpkin seeds, you don't get thistles. Not from pumpkin seeds. Mother Nature won't pull tricks on you over in the corner, snicker and push new thistles and you planting pumpkin seeds. She won't do that. You will get pumpkins from pumpkin seeds, and the reason is because the law is positive. Now here's number 3. I got excited when I found out the full dimension of this. See, you do not reap what you sow, but rather you always reap much more than what you sow. So the third key word is more. You don't get back what you put out. You get back much more than what you put out. And it works both positive and negative. On the negative side, it said, if you sow to the wind, you reap the whirlwind. So you've got to get ready for that, or you will be naive. See, anybody can, whether you will or not. See, that's the question. And here's a good question to ask. We are all buying somebody's plan. The question is, whose? Who's got you talked into doing what you're doing? Who's got you talked into your present plan? See, 10 years from now, you will surely arrive. The question is, where? But see, anybody, if you want to, can go searching for a good plan, pick it, and start working it. And sure enough, as the time passes, as it surely will, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, then you'll be winding up wearing what you want to wear, driving what you want to drive, living where you want to live, become what you want to become. But now's the time to fix the next 10 years. And who can? Anybody. Here's number 6. The 6th key to sowing and reaping. This is leveling with you now, as we promised to do. There's one thing better than the truth, and that's the whole truth. And here's part of the whole truth of the law of sowing and reaping. Number 6 is, you could lose. There are times when you just lose, no matter what you do. It's that kind of planet. You reap what you sow. Yes, but... what does that mean? Yes, but... well, the farmer plants his crop in the spring, takes care of it all summer, loves his family, works 10, 12 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week, is an honorable man. Come fall, he's got a beautiful crop, and he deserves every bit of it. But the day before he sends the combines into the field, a hailstorm comes along and beats it all in the ground, which means you lose. Somebody says, well, what did he do wrong? Answer, nothing. It's just that kind of planet. Sometimes it's going to hail on your crop and rain on your parade, so you got to get ready for that or you will be naive. That's just part of the life arrangement. And don't press me why. I was not in on some of the original decisions here, so I don't know how it got set up. But there's just times, sometimes you lose. That's part of life. But now here's number 7. The 7th key to sowing and reaping. And it goes like this. It's just another way to quote the same law. And it goes like this. If you don't sow, that's just another way to quote the law. If you don't sow, what? You don't reap. You don't even have a chance. So if you looked at your game plan tomorrow, you might come to the quick conclusion, I got to get some sowing going. How true. Get you some sowing going. And remember, you've got plenty of time. You've got all the time there is. Some people spend enough TV time to make a fortune. The latest article on television watching in this country, according to the latest article, the average television is on in this country in every household 7 hours a day, called the Big 7. I asked a guy one time what his TV cost. He said about $450. I said, you forgot to look at the price tag. He said, what do you mean? I knew he was a TV watcher. I said, that television costs you, in my opinion, at least $12,000 a year to watch it. not to own it. Owning it's cheap. Watching it is what's expensive. And I said, hey, $12,000 a year is too much to pay to watch TV. That's too much. Pay a little, but not $12,000. And he's the guy that said, I hope pay TV never comes. Okay. We're trying to cover an awful lot tonight. I realize that. But my time schedule is such that we just have to sort of give it all to you and let you sort the rest out. I wish we had plenty of time for questions and answers and that whole thing, but our time is just limited. But we are trying to go through an awful lot. I realize that. But looks like everybody's getting it. This is about the note-takingest crowd I've seen in a long time. Incredible. Does anybody have 5 pages yet? Anybody? Oh, fantastic. Incredible. Okay. Maybe you heard the story about the preacher down in Texas, southern part of the country. He was an evangelist back in the horse and buggy days. And he was very good at being an evangelist, and a lot of people used to come and hear him preach. And one day he put up his tent in one of these Texas towns and expected a big crowd as usual, come and hear him preach. And he got there, first night of the tent revival, walked in. 7:30, time to start. And to his surprise, the tent was empty. He thought, well, something must be drastically wrong. So he waited till 7:45, nobody showed up. 8 o'clock, zip. Finally, 8:15, one lone cowboy wandered up on his horse, tied his horse up outside, came in, sat down on the front bench, right, waiting for something to happen. The preacher thought, well, at least I better go down and talk to the cowboy. So he walks down, talks to the cowboy, and he says, Cowboy, I'm the preacher. And he said, I don't know what to tell you. Something's gone wrong. He said, this tent was supposed to be full of people. He said, I'm embarrassed. He said, you're the only one that showed up. And he said, I really don't know what to do. And the cowboy said, well, I'm not a preacher, so I really can't tell you what to do. You know, he said, I'm just a cowboy. But he said, I know this, if I went out to feed my cattle and only one showed up, I'd at least feed it. The preacher thought, hey, the cowboy is right. If you've got a good idea to share, you should share it, if there's 1 or 1,000. So he got kind of inspired by this conversation, and he jumped up on the platform and started to preach. As if the tent was full of people, just exploded. And he went for an hour and 15 minutes, just kept rolling. Finally, he quit. And when he finished, he came down off the platform, talked to the cowboy again. Says, well, cowboy, what did you think of my sermon? And the cowboy said, well, I'm not a preacher, so I really can't tell. You know, he said, I'm just a cowboy. But he said, I know this. If I went out to feed my cattle and only one showed up, I'd feed it, but I wouldn't dump the whole load on it.